Oh, all right, we did it. Good stuff. Hi, everybody. Look at that. We're actually live on a Saturday, which is incredible. I thank you for agreeing to join the show for what is in your time very late in the day. So I appreciate it. Before we get into it, who are you? Can you introduce yourself to the audience and give them your name and stuff?
First of all, thank you, Josh. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Laur. People know me mostly for either my YouTube channel or one of the books I wrote on Spring Security. I wrote one on Spring Fundamentals and another one on troubleshooting Java. I'm actually working on the second edition of the first one right now. And I work as a software developer, probably like many of you who have joined us today.
Absolutely. I know you from that DevOps talk you did 2 years ago on Spring Security. That was like chef's kiss. Perfect. DevOps Belgium, right? And then I found your YouTube channel, which is quite good as well. That is, by the way, hold on. I should have. A good show host is always prepared, and I am not a good show host. So let me hold on one second. This one. Yep. Yeah, okay. Oops. Sorry about that. Let's see here. Comments. Yeah, here we go. Public. Paste. Nice. There we go. So people, subscribe, like, do all the things you do. I'm sure you already subscribed. Who wouldn't be? I certainly am. So okay, good stuff. So I'm really glad to I think we met in person for the first time in recent memory, pretty recently. Like it was it's just nice. Maybe we met before the pandemic. I don't remember, but it's just been it was just nice to actually bump into you again. When did we see each other? Was it Belgium? Maybe I don't know when we saw each other.
Yeah, I think it was last time at the Vox in Antwerp.
Okay, cool. Well, that's really lucky for me, right? Like yeah. Let me see. Hold on. Okay, so like I thought that was like just a random thing, and I think we talked about being on the show, and I was I wasn't sure when we would get a chance to do it, and oh yeah, look at that. People are already. Oh, this is great. Look, nice sentiments here from our audiences. That's awesome. That's good. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for that. And yes, subscribe more. So yeah, I was just really grateful that we got a chance to do this. I put it in a note, and I think we talked about doing an episode together, and it's just been very busy for you and for me, and so I'm just very glad that we finally get to sit down. But it came at a cost. It's your Saturday, right?
Yeah, that's. I mean, no cost for being here with these excellent people, like watching us and wanting to learn more about Spring and wanting to hear us. So there is no cost for that.
No, I appreciate it. Yeah. Let's see. Okay, yeah. People are excited. Look at that. Hi, hello, good to see you. Look at this. Hello to you both, and good luck with the book. I'm looking forward to the end result. Thank you. That's so cool. Well, yeah, I appreciate that. Very good. So let's get into it, my friend. We've got so very little time, and it is like 10 o'clock your time right now, or 9 o'clock. I'm not sure where in the world you are, but it's later in the day, certainly, almost in the evening.
10 p.m. just a good time for a beer,
Yes, absolutely. But we don't encourage. Wait. Actually, does that violate like a YouTube thing? We don't encourage people to drink alcohol. That's terrible. Okay.
No. Don't do that. Never do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Where'd you buy the shirt from? That's a great question.
I didn't buy it actually. I think it's the shirt from Spring IO this year, the 10th anniversary.
That was a great show. We had some great anniversaries this year. We had
the 10th anniversary for the conference, the 20th anniversary for Spring, I think. So quite a lot of things to celebrate,
And 20 years of JFall, and what is Java now? 1995, so like 28. It's been a good year. Good year for such great stuff. Spring IO always has great shirts. You know who else has great shirts? DevNexus. Now, I don't know if you've ever
I've never been there, but I put it on my list right now. I actually have a pen here, so
Please, we need you there. It's a one of my favorite shows, and they always have these troll t-shirts. Like they have these troll t-shirts that are like one year they had the Millennium Falcon from Star Wars, but on the hull on the side of the ship it had the USS Enterprise from Star Trek tagline or whatever. Dev Nexus. Oh, okay. Are you asking? Dev Nexus is what we are talking about. But he got the shirt from Spring IO, which is a great show as well, and it's in Barcelona.
Yeah, the one in Barcelona.
Yeah.
Great show by Sergi. So Sergi is so good in doing that every year. So
the guy is anybody who puts on yes, Sergi is amazing. I'm not 100% like one of the best, and we are big fans, all of us on the Spring team. But he does extra. He's an extra amazing person. But I think anybody who does a conference worth going to, that's a special kind of energy and effort that I don't think most people can truly appreciate, yeah.
You need to deliver a real vibe for that, no?
Right.
You really have to have that vibe of
and great speakers, which is why I'm glad if you come to DevNexus, that'll be another great speaker there. My friend, like I said, I speaking of DevX and speaking of great speakers, like I said, I think you did a talk, a 3-hour thing for DevOps Belgium a few years ago. And that one went really viral, really, really great, right? And it's obvious you like Spring Security, and you like security. Like, why? What's wrong with you? Why? I love Spring Security too, but
I mean, everybody knows, no? So Spring is probably the most used framework today in the Java ecosystem.
Yep.
And Spring Security is the de facto to secure Spring applications. So you can't escape Spring Security, no? And so I don't think that there is, or at least there are a lot of applications out there, Spring applications out there that don't use Spring Security, because you need to implement somehow those authorization rules, the authentication, anything that's application level security. So you can't escape that. But at the same time, security is not an easy subject. And the problem is, okay, fine, it's not easy. There are many things that are not easy, but security is also sensitive. If you don't make it right, you can get in trouble. We all know that. We've seen that a lot of times. Now, we've seen that just a couple of years ago. You're probably preparing for your Christmas or New Year's Eve, and then you got a phone call and they say, hey, Log4j has a problem. I think everyone remembers that December, a couple of years ago, for example. So you can't just not take into consideration security. And since a lot of us build Spring applications, therefore we cannot not take into consideration Spring security. Right. You need to know it. You need to know it. You need to know how to use it properly.
Right.
Because if you just put it there, put that dependency in your Maven or Gradle or whatever you use, and you expect it somehow out of the box securing your application, well, that's bad because it doesn't happen like that. No, it's as I actually was saying in one of the chapters of my book, is like you install a security system at your home, and you don't install it properly. It's not the security system's fault that it didn't install it properly.
Right.
Same is with Spring Security. If you put Spring Security there as a dependency, you don't configure it properly, then it's not Spring Security's fault that your app will be hacked or will have vulnerabilities, or your users will. Yeah. Anyway.
So I agree, but with Spring Boot, I think we're kind of so nowadays, if you're using Spring Security and you're using it via Spring Boot, the default is to lock everything down, right? So really, you are protected by default, unless you undo it. You have to
unless you undo it, yeah. Right? But you know how with my experience, I would say recent experience, is that I
Okay.
see, I work as a consultant, so
Sure.
I do see a lot of projects, I do see a lot of installations, and most of, if not almost all of the cases, it's Spring applications with Spring Security. And you see people not knowing how to put that on. Like, how often do you think I've seen like CSRF disabled in
Oh,
configurations? How often? So you okay,
right.
okay, yeah, we know it's not always to be used, but I've seen it that often in places where you
Right.
should have had it. And then the question to the teams was, why did you write this line? We saw that on Stack Overflow somewhere, so we thought that's the right thing. We put it there. We saw that the requests are going through, working. So
Oh, so painful. Like you're 100% right. There are a lot of options, and people don't know when to use which. And I think the default with Spring Security, which is to lock everything down and to add as many protections as possible, is a very good default. But
definitely.
you will need to know how to change those at some point, right? For any real application. And I it can be overwhelming. I think and it's made even more complicated because, like you said earlier, security itself. Forget about software and Java and Spring and whatever. Security itself is difficult. Just the domain of
Yeah.
security is a full-time job, right? It's sort of like being a DBA. Like people. I mean, we talk about. I don't know. I mean, I think people have DBAs still. There's still people that are DBAs in their teams now, right? That's a full time job. If you want to like control Oracle or Postgres fully and maximally and get the benefit of it, you need somebody who's focused on that 100% of the time. And I think that's the same with security, and people would talk about shifting left, right? Everybody talks about moving things that we think about later on further earlier into the pipeline, right? Earlier into the workflow into production. And security is absolutely, you got to think about that early, right? It's not going to work if you just add it on later on. You're going to have terrible results and lots of latency because you're going to try and using other things when your web framework could do it for you.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. So I think it's one of the things we should consider upfront from the early stages, from the baby steps of your application. When you start a new application, whether it's a like greenfield one or simply a new microservice in your already huge environment, one of the first things you need to do is think about security.
Yeah, absolutely. So okay, what does it look like for you when you build? Let's say you're building a monolithic app. What are some of the like things you make sure are set? You know, when you're configuring or wielding Spring Security. Like I'm just curious what a guru does. What are the things they look for?
In terms of simply security itself, one of the first, maybe the first thing I start with is making sure the team has discipline. So I think discipline is it's like anywhere else. You need to understand, to learn how to consider some things without even thinking that you have to consider them. And that applies not only in security but applies also from my experience with maintainability, like writing clean code and stuff like that. There
Right.
are some rules that you have to learn to do them instinctively without having to think about doing them. And then of course, for ensuring that that's working, you should create a strong pipeline, because today we are in an advanced era where building an application is no longer build it on your computer
Yeah.
and sell it on a compact disk. No, now
Yes.
we have pipelines, we have possibility to add different tools. I don't want to discuss now about one is better than another, but you have to have those tools, and there are plenty of them you can use to ensure that you don't use deprecated dependencies, that you didn't leave endpoints vulnerable through misplaced configurations and everything like that. No, yeah.
That's a great point. I was just at uh, GitHub Universe, and at GitHub Universe, one of the things that's kind of very much on display is when you look at your dependencies and your pipelines. There's different phases, right? So what GitHub is they're trying to say, hey, we can scan all your stuff in the code, and we can find out your dependencies and CVEs and all these things by doing analysis of the code. But companies like Docker, they're saying, okay, well, we've got the ability to look at your Docker image and figure out things. And it's sort of like these two companies, obviously, they're tied to these different phases of your build. So they think that that's the most important. And for us, we poor mortals, we regular humans, we have to figure out how to pull it all together, and it can be quite overwhelming. Which is why I say, again, really good security is a full-time job, right? This is, it's got to be, like you just said, it has to be everywhere. It's not just the Java code.
Yes, people and especially organizations have to understand that security is a full-time job.
Yeah.
That putting in place everything to be easy to work with for the developers, and we are all human, we make mistakes. So
Right.
putting in place a strong, for example, pipeline with strong tools that take care of how you build the applications, that costs money. One of the things, I would say people, but I would actually say organizations. And when I say organizations, it's whoever has the decision there. Sometimes they try to cut corners in the wrong places. You see, hey, what is that actually needed for? No, let's cut some zeros from the paper because they it seems that, hey, this department, what are they actually doing? It's like, oh, no, let's cut that on the paper.
Like Elon Musk. Elon Musk, he disabled he fired the team that worked on the multi-factor auth for Twitter. So
I think he fired a lot of people, not only that.
Yeah, just everybody basically. But he fired the team that was maintaining the service that sent you a code for MFA. And so when that went down and you had security enabled in your account, you could no longer log in because nobody was rebooting the service. Like, oh, genius. This is what a genius move, really. 5-dimensional chess this guy is playing.
No, but there are so many actually organizations who try to cut corners. Sometimes they are pushed from people like maybe Elon, maybe relatives to him, whatever. Those guys we don't know, they are somewhere up there, and we and they say, hey, let's cut some budgets off. Where do we cut it from? Security, of course. Why do we need that? No,
or as Simon says, certificates too. Like, who needs updated certificates?
I mean, the certificates point, I think that's a pain in the where for a lot of organizations, because
in the PHP, yeah
in PHP. So for a lot of organizations, because they for example, they don't implement an automatic way to rotate them, and they expire, and then meanwhile they have already changed like the team 3 times in that past years, because people left because of whatever the reasons were, and then this is a third team, and they don't even know that they have certificates there, and they have to change them. So they find out they have to change them just before they crash in the production, and nothing works anymore. So I say, it's a certificate problem. It's a certificate problem. It's something that I've heard so often. No,
that's a symptom of a process problem. Did you see the new Spring Boot SSL reloading feature that just got dropped like last week or 2 weeks ago?
I didn't have the chance to try it.
Oh man, we should do.
Yeah, exactly.
Hack on that together. So now, like, because there are tools you can use to automatically renew your to swap, like Vault will automatically create new certificates for you, or the Spring authorization server. You can have it automatically expire things if you write some code, a little bit of code.
Spring authorization server, it's one of my favorite components of Spring now since it got out, and I'm really happy to. I have also tried to help with that. So part of some commits are there are also from me.
Oh, nice!
I really like it. I really love it. So it's
me
great.
too. Yeah. This is why we're friends. It is so good, but the point is, it's not hard to get your infrastructure to renew the certificates, but how do your applications see those new certificates, right? And now with Spring Boot, there's a way, the PEM certificate material, the key material support, the bundles, PEM bundles, in Spring Boot that they added, like I think in 3.1. Now there's a way to reload that automatically, right? Like you can actually change the certificate and the app will reconfigure itself. So this works automatically with Tomcat and Netty with Spring Boot now. Like, wow.
Which is basically everything we use
Yeah.
almost. Yeah.
I'm sure it'll get better soon, but I'm sure other like Jetty and Undertow and whatever will catch up, or maybe they've already got the code there and we just are not using the dependency. I don't know, but for now it just starts with Tomcat and Netty, which is, like he said, basically everybody. Hey, the sun came out. Look at that. That's nice. Right in my face. Yeah. So I love the Spring authorization server. That thing is because security is hard, but the authorization server gives you, I don't know, 85% of your what I would need to feel comfortable going into production with security. With an authorization server, with an IDP, I get that just with the authorization server dependency. Just start that Spring Deno authorization server.
Yeah, you can build your own, no? And there were like a couple of years where we didn't have anything that we could use to easily build an authorization server.
Right.
Because remember we years ago we used to have that Spring Security OAuth.
Right, and then that had an authorization server.
Yeah, which got deprecated. Then part of the resource server and the client were moved directly in Spring Security, which was a great
Right.
idea and a great decision. But then we remained without the possibility to build the authorization server. And in many cases, like in the community, I was hearing two sides. One of the sides was, hey, who would actually build an authorization server from scratch? And the other side would be, why don't use, for example, Keycloak or something else? And there was another side that was saying, hey, our stakeholders for some reason want us to build one from scratch. What do? We build it from zero ourselves. We use something deprecated. So that's why I feel that this authorization server really took a big stone from my heart, because suddenly I had answers for all these questions that I didn't know how to answer when people were asking me, and they were asking so frequently. And I said, hey, it can't be that people don't need to build authorization servers from scratch, because there are so many people asking me that. So it must be that they need that.
Right.
And that
well,
solved the difference.
I think it's because it's also conceptually it's easier for people to opt in to, like, I want to add certain features versus opting out of all the things that these because like Active Directory, people, the Active Directory is the IDP. It's the thing that everybody is using at some point in their organization, but it's also a full-time job. It can take a lot of people to set it up correctly and to implement it and deploy it and all that. I don't want to do that. I just have a bunch of microservices I want to protect, and I need them to talk to a directory. I need them to handle sort of a delegated authorization and authentication, but I don't want to do all this other stuff, So it can be very, very
and paying licenses and paying. So there are a lot of stuff that you would pay there. If you have something small or smaller and you want just to make a few people happy, then you don't need to pay that much money. So you build something on your own. And if you take the Spring authorization server, there are so many things that come out of the box that you don't even work too much. I was like proving even in at Devox Belgium a month ago that you can build an authorization server. I built it on stage like in 20 minutes. Of course, It was a minimum one. I don't say it was, but if I can build a working minimum authorization server in 20 minutes on stage, then that's definitely a proof that it's an easy way to build one. No?
Oh yeah, I did a video on this show on this channel of I got Spring Security legend Steve Reisenberg on the show, and like Steve's great, right? Like, and it was the coolest thing because I was just eating popcorn. I just watched him. He built an authorization server, great, really well done. But then he also secured an OAuth resource server, and then he also secured an OAuth client, and we had the whole thing all working like within like less than an hour. It wasn't just that I had deployed the IDP; it was that I also integrated it into these other things, and it was working great. Like, yeah, that's powerful. And I love what
they managed to do there, and I talk now about the team that worked on the Spring Security Authorization Server.
Right.
It's absolutely excellent. I mean, they did a really, really good job with that, and no one can say otherwise.
Nope, I agree. And so to be fair, there are some other argument, the one that you said earlier, which is why would you want to build your own? That's also true. I mean, it's a little crazy to build your own IDP, but if there's one team I trust to do it, it's the Spring Security team. They know how to do this stuff, you know. But Keycloak has been great, right? It's been around for years. People use it. It's obviously very good. Okta OAuth, Auth0, the same company, and they do a great job as well. I mean, I'm just saying it's not like there's not some good choices, but I do happen to like the Spring authorization server because it's just Spring Boot. So for example, you mentioned 20 minutes. I'll bet, did you change some of the persistence? Is that what you were doing in those 20 minutes?
No. In 20 minutes, I haven't implemented the persistence for the client or the users, and not even the key sources.
Okay.
But again, they are so well decoupled components that you can implement them in any way you'd like them, and you can like take the key pairs from everywhere you'd like. It's not dependent on any kind of key vault or whatever you want to use.
Right.
It's not dependent on any persistence mechanism or anything you want to use. So it's great because it offers you this much flexibility.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's just interfaces, just regular Spring Boot, you know, dependency injection. You write an interface, you implement an interface, and there's some default ones. There's an in-memory version of everything, and there's also a JDBC one for most of the key interfaces. But you mentioned the key pairs, and that actually there's a question here. Maybe you want to answer it. I don't know. Please explain the Spring Security Resource Server, JWK fetch and cache strategies. I don't know if you want to talk about that. I don't know. It's a very
I'm not sure if I correctly understand it, but in a short, when we talk about a resource server using JWT, for example, first of all, it depends on the kind of the JWT, how it's signed, and whether we'd like or not to use also introspection. For example, if we want to use a revocation mechanism on the authorization server. So normally, if say you don't want to use that, then the things are very easy, because the only thing you need to configure in the resource server is, considering you use OpenID Connect, is the URL to the public keys, which is published by the authorization server. So once you do that, the resource server will consume the public keys. Each public key is identified by a unique identifier. This unique identifier is found in the header of the token. So what the resource server does is, when getting the token, it compares the ID with all the ones in the set, finds the ID in the set, so finds the public key, and then uses the public key to verify the signature on the token.
Yeah.
This is one of the mechanisms. Of course, it depends then. Now, it will not call every time the endpoint. Indeed, it uses some caching so that it doesn't have to call every time and get every time the keys. But there is also the chance that you want to use a revocation mechanism at the authorization server level, case in which, even if you use JWTs, which normally are cryptographically signed and you don't need to have introspection for that, if you want to use revocation at the authorization server, then you would need to set introspection, and then a call will be made, will be sent to the authorization server to validate the tokens, to validate that they haven't been revoked. Okay.
There you go. You should send the consulting bill to Reactive Land. Reactive Land. Where's
now I'm writing it.
Okay, that's amazing. So so we both love Spring Security. Obviously, there's a lot there. I like Spring Security because like we talked about, it's just really, it's a very, fun fact. People don't know this, but before Spring Boot, the number 2 most downloaded Spring dependency after Spring Framework was, of course, Spring Security, because everybody's using. Oh, okay. We've got a follow-up question. He didn't send the mailing address for the bill. He sent another question. He said, or she said, I don't know. It's reactive land. Thanks for picking up my question. More explanation. What to do if the private key is exposed? Restart all nodes. Oh,
Hey. Oh, so if the private key, let's consider first of all, you have not only one key pair. So the resource server, the authorization server has this component that Josh and I were talking about a little bit earlier, the JW key source. And the JW key source, you can think about it as a manager of key set, a key pair set, which means that you will first of all have multiple keys. Assuming that somehow not all your key pairs have been stolen, I'm not sure how that could happen, but let's not think about the worst case scenario. It's not that bad, and if you have figured out that one of your key pairs have been indeed stolen, even if you don't use use revocation mechanism, you can still take that out. So you can implement your application in such a way in which you can take that out, so you don't have to restart your nodes and stuff like that. So you don't have to do that if you build your app properly.
The JWK key source, again, for reference, is an interface. So
yeah,
you can plug in your own. It's just a thing that returns the key pairs that are associated with the endpoint.
Which of course it means that it depends on the way you implement it. So we can finger point you and say it's your fault if something happens and it doesn't work.
I did a implementation of that with Rob Winch, right? And it was basically rotating your keys, right? But mine, I wanted it to persist the keys, but then of course you get into the question of the public key, I don't know, it's not too big a deal, but the private key, you've got to securely, you can't just write that to the file system. It has to be like encrypted. So then you get to the question of, well, where does if I'm encrypting it, if I'm writing the security, where's the key that unlocks the encrypted key live, right? And so then it's turtles all the way down. Somebody's got to have an actual key somewhere. And then of course you get, maybe it's vault or something, these are the things that you think about in security that most people don't even realize are going to be a problem.
And if you implement it, be very careful that you don't store it in memory too long. I always say secret things should be kept in memory only as long as you need them there. Why? Because heap dumps.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, it's not an easy thing like getting a heap dump, but imagine you have a long-lasting, long-running service, and usually in production it's good. If it's long-running, it's good. No, you don't want it. If it's restarting often, then it's not good. But if it's a long-running, yeah, go on, Josh. Sorry.
And this is Lambda.
Yeah. So imagine you have a long-running service, and you have someone accessing it somehow, maybe even from someone who has rights from the inside of the organization. It's still not good. If they can generate a heap dump on that, and you keep them in memory, you keep the secrets in memory unencrypted, then that someone will be able to see them somehow.
Right.
That's not good.
Not good at all.
It's the same reason why we never, for example, never ever kept even passwords unencrypted in the database. You could say, who cares? No? Well, I don't think that you would as a user of any kind of application to know that there is someone able to read your passwords there, no?
Nope. Yeah, because it's going to be loaded from the database into memory in a Java program somewhere, and that's the vulnerability. Even if they don't have access to your database, they might have access to your web server, right? Which is actually externally facing anyway. Yeah, it pays to be doubly protected there. Okay, one more question. This is and then you're out. You're done. No more questions. I mean, you're not out. You can stay, but we gotta move on. Resource server nodes that cache the corresponding public key of the stolen private key. Sorry for being chatty.
Okay, so what happens is that they've cached the public key of a private key that there is no longer there. Of course, in that case, it doesn't matter anymore, no, because if the private key is not there anymore and you took it out, then there will be no token anymore signed with that private key. So if even if they have the public key cached, no,
Not
it's
gonna
still
work.
not a problem. No, it will not be used at all. And remember, there are multiple private keys, so multiple public keys as well at the resource server side. And each public key and private key, because it's a pair, they are identified with a unique ID. So when the token comes to the resource server searches in the entire set of keys and finds the one identified by the ID of that specific token. Since you have taken out the private key, of course there will be a public key there, say cache for some time, but
Yeah.
it will simply not be used because there will be no token that is coming and you be used for that. Now, of course, there are different corner cases you can go into, like what happens if it's taken out but still a token is there. And remember, tokens have to be short-lived for a reason. A token, for example, a JV token, if it's 15-20 minutes is fine. So that's the most. Then you don't have to keep it longer. If you made a token that is valid for 24 hours, it's your problem. Like it's a wrong implementation. No.
Right. Very good answer. Good question. Thanks for that. Okay, another question there for you. Spring Framework 6.1 introduced the REST client, which I love, by the way. What are your thoughts on that?
So it's great because REST template hasn't been deprecated, but it's maintenance mode for some time already.
Years.
And then if you go into the REST template, you'll see that in the REST template documentation, you'll see that it kind of refers to, hey, use web client instead, but web client has another problem. It's made for reactive applications mainly. So if you want to use it to write non-reactive codes, you have like something dot block,
Right.
which I don't really like. I mean,
Like,
it's kind of, you see, it's not it wasn't made for that.
right.
And
I think
then what
IntelliJ even warns you. Doesn't IntelliJ color it differently? Like you're doing something wrong? Like you shouldn't be
most likely yes. So that's why for a lot of time I have recommended, hey, if you don't have a reactive application, I said use something like Spring Cloud's OpenFeign, for example,
Mhm.
which for me it's great. Why? Because it works kind of like Spring Data. You have only the interface,
Right.
so you define the contract, and then somehow magically something happens and it provides an
Right.
implementation. But OpenFeign, it's still like, it abstracts things, it's fine. But if if you want a less abstract way to write your HTTP requests, then you didn't have too many alternatives. So the REST client
Well, and so
yeah.
it's worth noting now that we also have Feign-like declarative interfaces in Spring Framework itself, since Spring Framework 6.
That's yeah
Anyway.
that's so it's kind of, it fills a gap that makes another part of the development easier, which we are used to about Spring throughout the years. It always made things easier and easier for developers, which is one of the things that I like about Spring. No.
Yeah, absolutely. So I agree with you 100%. Yeah, perfect response. So I guess the question is, when Spring Security OAuth? What is Spring Security OAuth? Is that Spring Security 6, whatever? Or because we don't have the Spring Security OAuth project anymore.
So when Spring Security OAuth client will support it. So I kind of understand the question. I think they refer to also, thank you, Johnny, for your question. So
Yeah.
they refer to how to create a client, no, and you had that OAuth 2 REST template. So it was an implementation that is customized such in a way in which, for example, if you want to implement the client credentials grant type, it knows to go to the authorization server, get the token, and then make the call. And that's a good question. I don't know when REST client, of course, will be adapted to that. And now, if you want to use it, you can use it because you can create your own implementation. But will there be a dependency in which you will have a class that will do that out of the box? I'm pretty sure the guys from Spring Security, they are already thinking about that, because I know them and I know they are already one step ahead. I don't know how to answer your question. When will that be? But I'm pretty sure at some point that will be, because as I said a bit earlier, Spring and Spring Security always, it's always version by version made our life easier, and simpler.
And also, I think what you just said is very true, which is, because one of the nice things about the REST client is that it uses the same extension hooks as the REST template, right? Just like the JDBC client uses the same interfaces as the JDBC client, right? So like the HTTP message converters that you configured for the REST template, those work in the REST client as well. So for maybe the interceptor model is the same. I think it is. I don't have my code in front of me, but if it's the same, then you could take the old one and just plug it into the REST client.
Yeah, most likely.
It's not done automatically, I guess, but
developers are lazy. They want a class there they can use already. They don't have to put their own interceptor. Probably that's all about. I can understand that. I'm lazy as well. I'm lazy as hell. So I can understand.
Answer, maybe. I don't know. We should try it out when we get some time to write some code. Okay. So let's one more question about security. We'll do one more because we got to move on. I'm keeping this poor man from his Saturday night. So developers who are relatively new to Spring Security, what are fundamental concepts of features that you recommend focusing on to quickly grasp its capabilities? I can't read apparently.
So when I hear quickly, I usually get goosebumps because I always have, I have so many students who are like, hey, I read the chapter 20 of your book about, I don't know, JWT, and I didn't understand it. And then I asked them, and did you actually read also the first 19 chapters? And they say no, because what I need at work is using JWT, but it doesn't work like that. No, because you have to first of all understand what's before. So now to answer your question, actually, I would start with understanding properly the class design behind the scenes. So I would for a web application, I would like to understand that filters are intercepting the HTTP request. They are delegating to an authorization to an authentication manager, which is further delegating to an authentication provider. I would understand how that works, that there are multiple authentication providers, what is their role, if you use credentials, what is a user detail service, what is a password encoder, and what is, of course, the security context, and how does it manage the authentication contract, which is describing the authentication itself during and after authentication happened. So once I very well understood that design, then I would go into more customizations, and even in OAuth, because anyway, what is behind the scenes, even in OAuth and basically any other thing that's related to Spring Security is kind of the same class design. If you understood that as the backbone of your knowledge about Spring Security, you understood that, you will basically understand how to customize each part of your application properly. If you don't understand that and you simply rely on copying pieces of code that seem to work from Stack Overflow or lately ChatGPT, because that's now the latest and greatest stuff you use, it doesn't always work, and you kind of might end up with vulnerabilities in your applications.
Oh yeah. Oh, and the worst part is you won't even know that you've got them because you didn't take the time to learn the fundamentals. You'll get hacked and then you'll blame Spring Security, and we'll end up back where we started in the beginning of this conversation, which is you blame the wrong thing. Okay, great conversation. I'm gonna try slowly to move to the next topic. By the way, thanks for the nice words there, friend. Next topic is JPA. Should we do? We can do some coding. I noticed that you've got a nice ongoing series of JPA on your show. which is, and I like watching you, but I've given up on trying to. I get that people use JPA. I'm just no longer sure why, and I'm just trying to figure out, what do you think of it? Do you like it? I mean, I'm sort of lukewarm. I'm not hot or cold, but I am hot about
Um,
other technologies, and I don't know. What's your use cases? How do you find it? When do you use it?
yeah. First of
Don't
all,
you miss records?
yeah. I'm not a fan of like any technology. I always think that each technology has to be used properly on the case. So no, I don't think JPA or JPA implementations could ever be used on every for every solution. And funny thing, I have seen so many cases where JPA has been wrongly used in the wrong place, causing a lot of issues.
Yeah,
JPA and an ORM implementation in general, this concept of object relational mapping, this can be really okay in places like, for example, you have a web application, your queries are not that long running, they don't work with a lot of data. If you have this kind of an application where you have like short running queries and working with data with not so much data, then you can use
right.
JPA because, well, it comes with a lot of advantages, some caching that is it happens out of the box, some adjustments it does on the queries that happens out. It's fine. It's some, you can say, hey, it's cumbersome at the beginning, you have to be attentive at many things, but with small applications like that, it kind of it's easier. Then of course I would not recommend it being used everywhere. No, like you have other alternatives for things like situations where you have to work with larger sets of data. I love, for example, Spring Data JDBC. Spring
Yes.
Data JDBC
Yes.
is, now imagine only, a lot of people use Spring Data JPA, and I've seen people like even like putting an equal sign between Spring Data JPA and Spring Data. That's not possible. Spring Data is basically an abstraction layer for so many technologies: SQL
Yeah.
and NoSQL, reactive and non-reactive.
Right.
Spring Data is a lot more than just Spring Data
Huge.
JPA. Spring Data JDBC, for example, it allows you to write simple native queries in a similar abstract way that you would use with any other kind of Spring Data, like even Spring Data JPA,
Yeah.
and in terms of writing the code, it would be the same. What it doesn't do, of course, you don't have the relations between objects because it's not an ORM behind the scenes. But in many
But
cases, it's
I don't
better
think
than.
people realize it can do some. I don't think people realize it can do some basic ORM relationship type stuff. We should do a video together. But I agree with you though. You're right. It's not as fully featured there as Hibernate, right? Which is,
It's
I
not,
know we're talking about
but in many cases, you don't need that. That's what I
right.
meant. In
Yes.
many cases, you don't need that complexity. Remember, as developers, what we do, we always must implement, and we tend to implement the simplest solution. You don't take a pill if you don't have a headache. That's how it works.
And if you take
So
Hibernate,
many
you might.
people take pills because they don't have headaches. And I saw it also on Juke there. I didn't have the chance to use Juke in so
Oh,
many projects, but I know Simon. You might know Simon Martinelli. We discussed last time in Belgium, I think, and I promised I will contact him and I will ask him to teach me more about Juke.
it's,
And then maybe when I know a lot more, I'll be able to share some thoughts on that as well. I don't
oh
want to
yeah.
share them now.
So the Hibernate team will tell you that that Hibernate really makes a difference when you have lots of relationships, and that's true, right? Because
That's
otherwise,
true. Yeah.
you're if you're doing SQL by hand and you have
Yeah.
n times m n or A times B, there you go, that's clear, A times B relationships, it gets very, very painful if you have a large number for A and B, because you have to code both directions and you have to code, it becomes painful. Whereas with Hibernate, the complexity is just, it's in the object model, not in the SQL, right? And so as long as your object model is coherent, then your SQL, the resulting SQL it'll generate it for you, and I agree with that. That's a good point. But and like you just said, and you're correct, which is that Spring Data JDBC doesn't have the best support for relationships and all that. It does. It can do kind of simple stuff there, but not nearly to the level of sophistication as Hibernate. And you're right. There's no built-in caching with Spring Data JDBC. You have to use the Spring caching abstraction, for example. But and so Hibernate is better for these really complex domain models. And that complexity that you pay to use Hibernate in the very beginning, it pays off when you have the scale, right? In the beginning, it's a lot. It's too much. Like if you take a little simple Spring Data JDBC example and a Spring Data JPA example, I can't use Java records with JPA, and I end up using.
Some will say you can't use Java records with JPA at the entity level, but you can write queries with DTOs. Now, the truth is that the complexity is at some point is very big, and that makes it cumbersome to learn. So even people with experience with using Hibernate cannot say that they are really trustful in what their application do. I myself, I always, when I have an application with Hibernate and I finish my use case, my business use case, what I do at the end, I spend 5 minutes with my profiler. I use Visual VM. I don't laugh. I do that every time. I open Visual VM and I'm profiling all the SQL queries happening behind the scenes. Because even with experience on using Hibernate, I'm not sure. I haven't introduced, for example, unnecessary updates or N+1 problems and anything like that. And I'm not even sure sometimes that the queries that I have written really look the way I wanted them. So I really want to see them either in the profiler or in the logs and see that they really look like the way I expected them to look like.
Right.
And sometimes not doing that can even lead to issues in production, because whenever you use them in test, you say, hey, don't you test your application? Yes, I do. But usually in test environments like dev, pre-production, and so on, you use less data. So sometimes you don't even see that something is happening because, hey, it works. It works, yeah. And then you move in production and nothing's working anymore because that's a lot more data there. And suddenly you discover you have an N+1 problem and you haven't figured out properly in the beginning, no?
Right. 100% agreed. And also, this is another reason why a DBA is a full-time job, right? Like making it harder for a qualified DBA to help you with the SQL and with the understanding what's happening. Oh, okay, there, I'm back. Yeah, I think yeah, let's see. I think have you had a chance? Yeah, okay. Show this question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, no. Internet is being flaky. There we go. So
it's a little bit of lag.
How come I can't? There we go. Is it better now?
Yes.
Hello. Okay. So I saw this great. I was in Indonesia a couple of months ago, and somebody's asking me because I was there for a Java user group, right? And they're asking if I had a chance to work as a genuine Java garbage collector. And
was it?
No, I wish I could have.
So that means you should have been on Java Island and work as a garbage collector, no?
Yep.
I guess that's what they all mean.
Exactly. Yep. That's my I love that. That's my favorite tweet. I joke about that all the time with my talks. Okay, so JPA. Okay, good. So JPA, I agree with you. There's some interesting use cases there, but I do think like I said, for that use case where you've only got one or two tables in a small microservice, adding JPA, if you just do like go to start, you can try it yourselves, people, and just go to start.spring.io, create one single entity with like one field, an ID and a field, and then add and then use Spring Data JDBC. Start up the application. It'll take twice as long to start up as the same thing in JDBC, right? Twice as long. It'll take twice as much memory. The GraalVM compilation will be twice as long. It's an extra 70 megs of native image memory just for that one extra field. Like if you're using JPA adds a lot of cost, and unless you're willing to pay for it, unless you're doing a large system with a lot of tables, I think that cost is a lot of times not worth it. But it really does pay off when you have a very complex domain model.
It's not even only if you have a complex or no domain model, but it's also with how much data do you work with. So I've seen like about a year ago, an application that was simply using some scheduled process behind the scene, and it was like using all of it. It was selecting thousands or tens of thousands of records. What happens with those records if you use JPA? They are collected in the context, that context managed by the entity manager. So you will end up at some point with an out of memory if you are not careful with that, because and of course out of performance issues, because they will try to be managed somehow in memory, which is not something that you would expect normally.
Right. Oh, okay. Good stuff. So, let's see. We've got now, we've been at this for about an hour. I think people want to see some code. Oh wait, before we do that, actually, before we get into the code, I have a question for you. What's your journey? Like, how did you get into software? I always like to ask people this. Like, how did you decide to do software instead of becoming a nurse or a plumber or a lawyer, or I mean whatever, whatever. Why do this instead of a real job, like a real
so that's actually exactly, that's actually a funny story, because I've been attracted to computers since I was like 6. I wanted to know what's behind the scenes, so I kind of grew up with wanting to know what's behind the scenes of computers. And from hardware and software, I don't know, software attracted me more than hardware for some reason. And I started with being like trying to figure out how to create my own stuff. Fortunately for me, things were much easier back then, because programs were smaller, and it wasn't like when we think now about software, we think about complex stuff, architectures, and so on. Back then, there weren't that many things, and I grew up with it, like progressively becoming a software developer.
Cool. For me, it was the reason I chose software over hardware was because when I was in those years when I was finally starting to learn computers as a child, we were poor, and refactoring hardware is very expensive. Refactoring code, back in the 90s, it could be expensive, but it was definitely a lot cheaper, and it was a one-time cost, or once a year or whatever. Anyway, okay, so good stuff. So this has been like I'm a huge fan. Obviously, for people who are listening on the podcast when this comes out, I hope they'll go to your channel, which is we put it here earlier. It is youtube.com at LAURSPILCA. Like and subscribe. Subscribe first, then like all the videos, because it's a good channel, and you can see obviously this is a very smart person to listen to. No, thank you. That's part one. Now, you want to do a demo or anything? You want to talk code?
Well, I was thinking, let's go a bit through upgrading a small application from Spring Boot 2.6 to 3 point something. What do you think?
Yeah, and there's some bumps there, and that would be really good. Feel free.
Yes.
The
with a focus
button
on Spring security. So how do I share my screen? Can I do that?
I think so. Down there, do you see a present button?
Yes. Okay, I'm not sure if I did it right. You might be able to see my IntelliJ here already.
Maybe.
Or maybe you need to do some magic there behind the scenes, Josh.
Yeah. Let me just figure this out. Okay, there. I have to add that, and then
Yeah, so this is a really, really small application. If I'm going to my POM XML, it's a Maven one. You will see that it's already using 21. Wow, that's fine. I
nice.
love it.
Congrats.
But I need to upgrade it because it's kind of old. Like, who does still use Spring Boot 2.6 point something? They know it's 3 point at least something. I don't know.
3.2 in a few weeks, people. Like less than 2 weeks, 3.2 comes out.
Yeah. So we are looking really forward to that. But anyway, so you will have to do some of the things. So let's see what happens if I just put this newer version here, and then I'm going to try to reload my Maven. And I do expect some difficulties from multiple points of view. This application might use some older configuration. Then I think the first thing we'll notice is that something changed in terms of I'm using MySQL. So if I'm not wrong, this repository changed on GitHub to some new group ID and some new names. So first of all, I would have to actually make sure that it looks fine from that point of view. So let's try it again. But yeah, it works now. No, so it
Yeah.
did sync correctly. But if I'm going into the application and my job is to upgrade the Spring Security configuration, it looks like a mess. You see the screen is full of blood. I have to do something about it. So let's take it step by step. Yeah. So what do I have to do first? Web security configure adapter. Oh man. So we don't use this for a long time already. So it's months since this was cut out. So that's why upgrading from 2.6 to 3 point something. It doesn't even exist. So for a couple of versions, I think it was deprecated, but now it's gone completely. So you can't simply use it, which is a good thing. It's a good thing. I really didn't like I had to extend get stick to that web security configure adapter class. Now the things are a lot easier. So instead of doing that, you just go here and change this to a bean, which you can add in the Spring context. It's called security filter chain. Yeah, you can change the name of the method to whatever you want, because being it's not an overriding anymore. It doesn't matter what name you give, and maybe you can even give it in your production a much better name than I did here. And then of course you need you do that to put a bean in the Spring context. No, so it means you really have to return something. And fortunately for us, the things were made in such a way in which this is the most easy for you. You can still use the HTTP security instance. It gets automatically injected to your method. So now it also has this build method that returns the instance of security filter chain, which automatically gets now plugged into the Spring context. So that's the first thing that I had to do. Now you can see it's still not working. No, so why is the HTTP basic failing? We all used to, and if you are now searching on Stack Overflow, you will see again a lot of examples where HTTP basic doesn't have a parameter. So what if you start learning Spring Security now? Oops, you are in trouble, because HTTP basic now is it mandatory has to have a parameter, and this parameter is called a customizer. It helps you to write all the customization. Now, when we used to use the HTTP basic without any without any parameters, with anything added, then this is equivalent to using the customizer with default, which is basically an implementation that does nothing. Fine. So this is the equivalent with having absolutely nothing here.
So
if I would, yeah,
can I just say,
yeah,
I'm sorry for the custom, so the context, the builder within the context of these methods. That's because I complained to the Spring team, right? Because they the old
oh
seriously,
man,
I was the one that made them do this. So the old fluid DSL, you had HTTP basic dot, and then you'd have to do the source formatting to make sure it didn't look ugly, because you didn't have hierarchy, right?
yeah.
So now you've got these builders within the method, you can call HTTP basic, and then there's a builder context object you can use to configure things. Much cleaner. You get the hierarchy for free now. But
not only cleaner, but imagine that, like I will get down below here, no, and I
yeah,
would say, hey, we have to do the same here. No, I'm just gonna have to like create my implementation. But what sometimes people don't see is not only this it can be a lambda. That's fine. Yes,
right,
it can be a lambda because the customizer itself is a functional interface. But
right.
the most important thing here is that at some point this, which in reality will be a lot larger, you can now easily extract the whole configuration to a different class
Yeah.
and hide it and test it properly. Very importantly, you have to test all your configurations. So unit and integration tests are very important. No? So now you can take this out as an implementation, and that will not only make your configuration a lot smaller and readable. So from the maintainability point of view, this is a great achievement, but also testable because you will independently be able to test your configurations. No?
100%. And I do not take credit for them removing the old one though. So, so they added it years ago, right in the 2.x line, the Spring Boot, Spring Framework, Spring Security 5X line. Anyway, great stuff. And you know who did that? It was Lefteria, the Lefteria Stein. She was on the Spring Security team. She did the actual implementation of all that stuff. It's so good. It's just so good. And this is an example, by the way, of the Spring Security team taking the ergonomics of security almost as seriously as the security of applications itself, right? The ergonomics have to be, like we said earlier, it has to be approachable so that people can kind of work with it quickly and feel like they're making progress. And so the API, having the support, having the feature is certainly there. The features are all there, but if they're not easy to use or intuitively wield, then it'll be different and difficult. Anyway, sorry, carry on.
No, the name changes to authorized HTTP requests, which makes a lot of sense for me because normally you were anyway writing authorization rules for endpoints, for HTTP endpoints. So yeah, and one of my favorites, no more MVC matchers, no more AND matchers. Now you only have one method. It's called request matchers. That's everything you need. That's everything you have to write. And why do I like this so much? Because there were so few people I knew who really knew the difference between AND matchers and MVC matchers. In most of the cases, I've seen developers were simply, when you ask them, why did you use AND matchers? Because that's what I found on Stack Overflow.
Oh.
So no more confusions. Request matchers. That's it.
Yeah.
Okay? Only one method. Then we have the access method. I love this one. I love this change. You see, it's not compiling anymore. It's not compiling because access method was previously made to get a spell expression as a string. Right. But the problem with spell expressions is that people tended to change them and add more throughout the time. Add one more case there, one more case there, and at some point you ended up with like 4 or 5 lines of a spell expression, and then something didn't work, and you had to debug that. Debug the spell. It's not that easy, no. So instead, now what the access method does is that it takes an authorization manager implementation. This is an interface. You can implement it. You can create your own rule without having to write a spell. And
Lambda.
because
Lambdas. I'm sorry, just lambdas. So good.
And if you don't have the time, you want to upgrade, but you don't have the time to change, of course, in reality, you will never have a spell that says it's authenticated. That's just for my small demo stupid project here. But normally it will be a larger one. No, it's and not easy like to change. And then what you do? You have an alternative because you still want to be able to upgrade your application. So this implementation called web expression authorization manager, it basically does the same thing that the old access method was doing. It interprets your spell expressions and uses them the same way. And then the same thing I have to do here for like CSRF, for example. I had a small configuration. I will have to use a customizer. You can use lambdas. Yes, we love them. You can take it out in an implementation. And because it makes sense for everything to be homogeneous and to be like consistent, instead of ignoring and matchers, the name of the method will change to ignoring request matchers as well here. Oh, semicolon problem, the old semicolon in Java. We love it. And last on this page to finish completely, enable global method security.
Cool.
That old annotation that we used to be able throughout the code to use annotations over methods like pre-authorize, post-authorize, pre-filter, post-filter, secure, and roles allowed.
Right.
I'm not sure if everyone has ever seen it written with any other flag than pre-post enable in the past 15 years.
No.
Normally there are two more. You can enable the secure enable, which will enable you the secured annotation, or you can enable the JSR 250, which will enable you that roles allowed annotation. Which funny, I guess you guessed it was introduced with JSR 250 together with some other annotations as well, like post construct and pre-destroy, and I know we know them. And normally you don't use secured and JSR like roles allowed anymore. No, I never use them. But in the last 15 years, you probably have only used the pre-post enable. So now what happens? This global disappears here. And then if you use the new enable method security annotation, you don't have to use this flag anymore as well, because it comes default with set on pre-post and enabled. So this is the conventions. We set that as a convention. No, you anyway weren't using secure and roles allowed, and the convention is to use pre-post annotation. So why do I always have to write pre-post enable true?
You don't. No more. They just fixed it. It's the same behavior, just easier,
Yeah.
I love this. I would add. Oh, what? Sorry.
Hooray, we managed. This is it.
This is much better. Can we see the whole? Yeah, that's. Oh, look at that. So clean. One more thing. If I were you, you could get rid of the word public on all the methods and all the class, and it would just be the same thing.
Yeah.
Even cleaner. Look at that.
That's and of course, guys, never use in the real world the no password encoder. Use bcrypt. Use it depends on it depends on the case, but no password encoder is a password encoder we only use in examples and tutorials, because as the name suggests, no op, it doesn't do anything. It's no operation, it doesn't do anything. If you go in the no password encoder, it's just plain text password, so it doesn't encrypt or hash the password. So in a real world app, do use a real password encoder implementation.
You could show them the password encoder factories static method. That'll give them the one that's like future compatible. Factories, I think it's
just it's just my computer.
Oh,
sorry. Oh. This one, no.
It's password encoder factories dot create delegating something. Password encoder factories, yes. There you go, that one.
Yep.
And then there's a static method there called create delegating password encoder. That's the one people should use.
Yeah.
So by default, it's bcrypt, but in the future that might change, and now your passwords are future proof.
Yeah, super.
Okay, my friend. Well, this is like I mean, this is you made it look easy. It is easy if you understand logically why people are doing it. But yeah, I get that people are a little confused, and somebody mentioned that they love the Spring open rewrite recipes for migration, and I do too. But they don't do a great. They do an okay job right now. They could get a little bit better. Is my point. With Spring security in particular. But they can get you started. Have you tried, Laur? Have you tried Open Rewrite? It's a bunch of open source. It's an API for programmatically refactoring Java code, and it modifies.
I didn't have the chance. No, sorry, I didn't have the chance to use it, but I think it's great. No, it should be great. If so many people say it's great, so it should be.
It's pretty good. I did look at it once on this channel, and it was it's just you can write your own refactoring rules. You can say, okay, because it's like a reflection API for source code, you know.
Okay.
Did you see also the Java team at the Java Dev Day? They just like a few months ago they announced they're actually working on a refactoring API for Java source code as well that contributes. It's not you don't change the source code, you change what's fed into the compiler, I guess, right?
Oh,
And
that's
so,
really good. That sounds really interesting. It's really good news.
yeah, I mean, we live in amazing times, my friend. Okay, so I think this has been great. I think I got people who are watching on YouTube. You just got to, again, I've been trying to get Laura here for so long because I know you're a very busy person and you're very visible in the community doing all this really cool stuff. So I appreciate you taking time. It is literally the weekend for you. I mean, it's the weekend for all of us, except for people maybe it's the weekend for everybody right now still. But the point is, I cannot thank you enough for being here. Really great.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Josh. And again, there is no better weekend or without the community, without joining you and discuss a lot of interesting stuff here. So
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Where are you? So are you on the internet? And if you are, if you want to be found, where do people find you?
You can find me besides YouTube, of course. You can find me on Twitter or whatever the name is now, and on LinkedIn as well. So you can, you can find me there. It's the same tag you can use for all of the social media platforms.
Okay.
And join me, ask me questions wherever I can help. Please let me know, and I will try to do my best.
All right, you're a legend. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, guys. Have an excellent rest of the day.
Bye-bye. Have a good weekend.
Bye.